What happens if you get your green card through marriage, and then before your green card expires, your marriage ends in divorce or annulment? Are you going to be deported from the U.S.? And the good news is not necessarily. Let me give you a little history of this. I worked for the Immigration Service in the late 70s, the early 80s. And at that time, the examiners had an almost impossible job. They would sit down in a room with the husband over here and the wife over here, ask them questions to see if they were living together. And if it seemed okay, the spouse who was not a citizen would get a green card forever. And it could have been a totally phony marriage. So Congress changed the law in 1986 to say the person who was getting the green card would get a 2-year green card, and then another application would have to be filed. The green cards are usually based on marriage to a citizen. It could be a marriage to a permanent resident, but as of the time I'm talking right now, it does take over 2 years to get a marriage, to get a green card through a marriage with another green card holder. So let's just leave that off the table right now. You have to file an form I-751, and that will turn your 2-year green card into a 10-year green card. If you're married to your spouse at the end of the 2-year period, right before the end of that, there's a 90-day window that you jointly file the I-751, and you submit tax returns, joint assets, other proof that the marriage is good, and usually there's no interview required. But let's say that instead of still being married, you're divorced or the marriage is annulled. What happens at that time? Well, you still have to file the I-751 with the divorce decree. You don't have to wait for the 90-day period. It can be filed right after the divorce or the annulment is finalized. And in this case, there usually is an interview. Obviously, the Immigration Service is going to be suspect. So what's the purpose of filing the 751 waiver? Well, I mean, the main purpose is for you to prove to the Immigration Service that the marriage is bona fide and that it was based on love, not just to get a green card. You submit the same type of evidence that you do for a joint petition, but you have to think a little harder about it. For instance, if you're divorced, but you're still friendly with your spouse, you definitely want to get an affidavit from that spouse talking about the validity of the marriage. How do you document the waiver? Well, you want proof that you were living together. You want to show joint assets, income tax returns, utility bills, insurance policies, and you can get affidavits not only from your ex-spouse, but maybe from loved ones, especially in your ex-spouse's family. If your spouse's parents are going to say, okay, they lived together, it just didn't work out, and the spouse might be too mad at you to give that affidavit. The affidavit from his parents or his brother or his sister could be the determining factor. What happens if the I-751 waiver is denied? Do you get automatically deported? Can you appeal? Well, really, neither one of those. There is no appeal, and you're certainly not automatically deported. You have a right to have a removal proceeding before an immigration judge. And before the judge, you can renew the I-751 waiver form. And if the judge should deny it, or even if he approves it and the government appeals, you can go to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and they could overrule the judge. Now, what's the worst thing that can happen to you when you're in front of a judge? The judge can say, I think it's a phony marriage, and therefore Section 204C of the law applies. What does Section 204C mean? It says that somebody who is engaged in a phony marriage to try to get a green card can never be petitioned, not by another relative, not by another spouse, not by an employer, no petitions at all. There's still a few ways they can immigrate, but they'll probably have to get a fraud waiver to even do that. And people ask me all the time, well, do I need an attorney? I mean, my spouse and I are still together for the I-751, and I guess most people will expect an attorney to say, absolutely, you need an attorney to do anything with immigration. But I happen to disagree with that. I think if it's a good marriage and you're still together, you really don't need an attorney's services. You can fill out the 751 form, it's pretty short, submit the evidence, and there'll probably not even be an interview. How about, though, if the marriage has ended in divorce or annulment? Here I think the answer is clear. You do not want to do this yourself. You definitely want to get an attorney. When we put together these 751 waivers, often they're over 100 pages long with 20 or 30 exhibits, and you know you're going to be interviewed, so you want the attorney to prepare you to have a mock interview, and if you're going to bring witnesses because you're before a judge, you want the attorney to prepare the witnesses' testimony. I mean, we have 3 essential rules for people giving testimony. One is always tell the truth, but just as important is number 2, don't volunteer information that the examiner or the government attorney or your own attorney ask you. And then finally, don't guess. I mean, if they ask me, what did your wife fix for breakfast this morning? Chances are by the afternoon I've already forgotten. So don't try to give an answer that might be contradicted by evidence that they already have in your file. On our website, we do provide a lot of resources on the 751 waiver process. There's the form itself and the instructions, which are on the USCIS page, but we link to those. There's also 3 memos from 2003 and 2009, one year there were 2 memos, that explain the 751 waiver process and how the Immigration Service looks at it in great detail, so you'll want to read those. And then there's also some very interesting federal court decisions. And we'll talk about those, both those federal court decisions and the INS memos, or the USCIS memos, in another video. But just be aware, take a look at our website, read it on your own, and then when you meet with a lawyer, whether it's me or someone else, come in with questions that you've gathered from those court decisions and from the waivers. And it's a tough process. It usually takes a couple of years, so good luck to you.